It's a storm out there. Uh, a few years back, I was walking on military installation, and during the war, so I was deployed, and it was nighttime, and where we were, there were blackout conditions. So it's not like that we had street lights or anything like that. At night, it's pitch black, and only inside the buildings there could be any sign of light. And on one of my foot patrols, just my nighttime strolls to see what I can catch. It's the nature of the beast. I would go out to dinner, and I saw some military units pulling up to the side of the road, and because they was their turn to go get a meal, they had been probably on patrol for many hours. And I also spotted in the dark off the side of the road, it's mostly dirt road, and I spotted one individual in the dark, kind of stooping over something on the ground and picking up something. And when he turned around, he spotted me, and I could see panic, even though it was dark. I didn't recognize the guy. I knew he was a third-tier contractor from another country. He was not an American, but seemed nervous. And I approached him and I asked him what was going on. He casually responded that he immediately showed me what he had found on the ground. And he was about to take it, thinking that the object that he had spotted on the ground, for some reason, he had eagle eyes at night. And he was going to take it back to camp. And when he relinquished it, he said that he thought that it was like a video game, one of those pocket video games. And I explained to him, you're not supposed to have electronic devices. It's not my policy, it's the Army's policy. And I never really was big on enforcing 100% across the board when I knew that someone was not trying to basically lie to me. And I figured he was sincere, but that he found it, he had every intention of taking it because he was curious. Probably thought that it was very strange looking, horrible game unit. And I know soldiers and everybody likes their games. I can't say that I'm a gamer, but I told him to go ahead and go back to his camp, get some rest, get chow, whatever. And I bid him a good night. And he was more than happy to leave. When I looked at the device, it turned out to be, I pulled out my flashlight and it turned out this is not a small gaming unit. It was a GPS unit. And more than likely had fallen out of one of the trucks, one of the vehicles that the Army was driving to the base. Maybe a soldier had it in their cargo pocket and it fell out. Because sometimes we get to rushing a little bit and it just happens. But GPS units have vital information that I would consider to be sensitive nature. And it was just that close for an individual that, even though they be hired from a relatively friendly country, still knew better than to pick it up. Now he could have claimed that I was going to bring it to security to make sure that it was disposed of and all that. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But it's not hard to miss something, to misplace. Two-way radio thefts were big. They probably still are, but in particular in certain areas, in some circumstances, because missing radio it's tuned into certain frequencies and they can be tweaked. They can be used to monitor radio traffic, and they can also be tweaked so they can be returned and reintegrated back to where it came from in order to monitor communications directly. So given those circumstances, I was very, very cautious in handling the matter, but I did not consider it to be an ill-intentioned act for this individual to pick up the unit off the ground, simply curiosity. But I returned it to the unit. I had to find someone to return it to that night, and I said, you can go get those guys when they finish their routine to go get food, and it's time for them to turn in for the night. They really need to take some time to go over their equipment to be able to do an inventory. I'm sure someone is going to get in trouble for missing that unit, and also the information that's in it. So if someone that actually knows what the device is, they can use it for other purposes. And it just never ceases to amaze me how people can just be absent-minded, or how we all do it. We just, a phone falls out of your pocket. Nowadays, everybody has a phone. Little kids have phones. Really old people, they have a phone. And we're tethered to these devices. And sometimes we really think that the device holds some great secret, like everything's protected because it's on our person. And some communications are encrypted. I want to make my point here in a moment. I was starting to show you a story that came out just yesterday. And it didn't spook me in any way, because I've seen this before. It doesn't take much to make someone's life really miserable. And I'm not going to show the video because I already tried to run it, and I'm going to get a bunch of ads. And I had to redo this video for that reason. I don't want to waste your time on that. But the basis of the story is that just recently the FBI ran an audit for the State Department. I don't know who initiated the audit, but an attaché at the embassy in Mexico City, the cartel was targeting this individual. How they got a hold of let's call it that. That's the Latin American affairs attaché. So this is the diplomat. And it could be just a casual encounter. Like, these people on embassies, they're used to the culture, they've been there for a while, and it could be any of us. Like, we get used to going to our regular cafes every morning and mingling with the local people, and we establish pretty well established routines. These are patterns of life. And the bad guys have their own analysts. They analyze patterns of life of diplomats. People in the military who are stationed overseas, it's the same thing. And no one is immune to this surveillance state and this type of activity. They used this person's phone data to hack into it, to hack through Mexico City's surveillance system. And that tells me, I already know that the cartels run the country, but this is pure 100% proof now that it's hard to dispute that it's a narco state. It's so deeply embedded that they actually access infrastructure. That's a video on its own for a topic for another day. But in itself, just accessing cameras, surveillance systems that the government runs, just to track this one individual. And how did this person lose control of their data? And that remains to be seen. Then this isn't to judge this person harshly. We all have to go through those trainings on cybersecurity and how to protect our data, how to protect ourselves when we're not at work, how to protect not just data but devices. Don't go into a public place with a government issued device of any sort. Don't do business outside of the area where you're supposed to work. And sometimes we forget. Just grab a phone and go to a cafe, or you have to meeting someplace outside of the area where you work, be outside the office, outside the embassy, even for a civilian office. Just if you work for a company and you have nothing to do with government, it's the same thing. Companies are pretty fastidious about protecting data, and this is the reason. Industrial espionage is a big problem. Other companies trying to steal trade secrets and whatnot. It happens. So companies protect their information, their intellectual property, they protect it. So that's why they always really strong about make sure that you don't lose your phone. And if you lose your phone, you have to tell security, you have to explain. The government does the same thing. Maybe this was not a lost phone. It could be something as easy as leaving it behind and someone picking it up long enough to engage in a nefarious activity. It could be in any kind of tampering, and then do what they need to do and then returning it to the owner. And then for that person not to be sure what just happened. So the recommendation here is, if that happened to you, or if that happened to this individual, then they have to report that I lost control or custody of my electronic device for some period of time, but it was recovered. I would look very closely at ensuring that it hasn't been tampered with. I don't know. These are theories. Normally, I'm the first one to want to debunk any kind of a conspiracy theory, because I just want more proof. I want something to sink my teeth into that seems more concrete than just a feeling. But sometimes a feeling really is pointing. X marks the spot. The feeling is telling you this isn't right. And I have another story here in a minute on surveillance, basically. But they're all conducted here in the United States. So this is a foreign country, and your job takes you, even if you work for a company and not for the government, and some of the same precautions need to be put in place. Be watchful where you are. I keep saying that there's no such thing as an expectation of privacy, because if you're in a public place or it's a common area shared by other people that are not from the same organization, and even within the same organization, sometimes what you work on is not a business that needs to be discussed in front of other employees, even though you work in the same building. And that can be applied to anything, any industry, governmental or private. And I'm only throwing a very loosely formed opinion on how this audit found that. I'm glad that the audit was published. At least there's a report out there. I need to download it and read the whole thing. But the gist of the whole story is that this person from the U.S. Embassy is being tracked to their own phone data. So they know where they go, and they know their routines, and they're using infrastructure or surveillance that's already in place to map out that person's day. For what purpose? We don't know, but it can be a good purpose. This is a cartel element, then that's something to be concerned about, naturally. Let me show you the other story. So before I show you that, because I reported about a soldier recently that was actually caught spying for the other side. And that story came out, and then it was a big to-do for about 10 seconds, and then it disappeared. And these stories don't seem to resonate too loudly with the public, because they're not stressed in a way that really show the dangers of having active spy activity happening in the United States. And these guys were arrested. They're surveilling Navy bases. And the amount of money, I'm not going to run the video because I know it's going to trick me into some ad. And I've seen incidents of people hanging around bases, taking pictures, or just parking too close to a gate. And that's usually how you pick up on that activity. These guys actually doing money drops. So they're pretty active. And the story just came out today. They actually got arrested today. Officially, the FBI picked them up. But yesterday, the story was actually starting to make a brief show on the news, but not a lot of dissemination. So they seem to come and go. And this reminds me of the time I was at a military installation on the Midwest, and a large military installation. I was going to be deployed to one of those nice sunny places where people want to shoot at you and blow you up. And I had to go through training like many other people do. So how this works is you get a set of orders, and you pack your bag, and then you fly, and they pay your ticket, and they tell you, when you get to the airport, go to a desk. And this is pretty well known. There's a desk where there's usually a civilian, probably someone from base, could be a contractor, it could be a federal employee, but more than likely it's going to be a contractor. I've never seen a military person sit at the desk. And all they do is receiving people who are coming to the base for training. And what they do is they have a shuttle, and they have a bus, and they sign you in, and then you sit down and wait for as many people as they're waiting for that flight. And when everybody's there, they just say, you just go out that door and take your luggage, and then they board the bus. There's nothing out of the ordinary about that process. But this is in time where I redeployed as a contractor and decided to just not bring any kind of gear. And I mean, the duffel bag was totally civilianized. I had nothing that showed, even my clothing, there's nothing on me, or a ball cap or anything that showed that even I had any affiliation with military at some point. are at the time. And I just went account to blend in, just person traveling. And something told me just grab a cab or a ride share to the base. But for some reason, I have a sense of duty and I wanted to just follow the instructions. I don't know why. There's no point in waiting for a shuttle. Transportation from an airport all the way to a base, perfectly normal to arrange. I decided to just kind of sit down and chill and took my gear and I sat back at a distance from the desk. I saw the desk, but I didn't check in. There was really nobody there. Somebody eventually showed up, but I didn't check in. I'm here. I just sat back and I figured I'd watch everybody else get off the flights and then start following that group. I just wanted to see how they played it out. And before long, 2 other flights arrived, and then more people got off the flight, and more people who are former military who did contracting or military people. And they were getting off the flight, and they were just doing what I was supposed to do, just go to the desk, and eventually more people gathered, and I realized that I'm going to be riding with these guys. But I waited until the very last minute. And not too far is one of the exits where we have everyone gathered. I didn't think it was a big airport. Everyone was picking up their luggage, and there were some individuals I observed that were observing everybody else getting on those flights. Normally, when I see that, it's usually young men, and they're probably just hanging around to see if they catch young women coming off the flights. Because I don't know, where I grew up, the guys used to do that. Just go to the airport, or if they're working, they're just checking out the women. But these guys are not checking out the women. They're just standing around like they were taking head count. And that kind of, you get that spidey sense as that, why are these guys doing that? One guy worked at a concession stand. The other guy was a cleaning guy. There were 2 others that I thought they were just waiting for someone to get off the flight because they were family members. They were not. They were just random guys that were just standing there. But they seemed to be positioned in a way that I thought was peculiar. So eventually we got to the bus. I followed the group, and I decided I'm just going to go ahead and ride the bus. And my phone was dying because the battery, as usual, I don't know what it is that I can never upgrade my battery, or Apple has a thing for just giving this consumers really crappy batteries. And mine was because of the weather, and I'd already used up most of the battery. And I wanted to document something. Something told me to pull out my phone, but my battery was dying. I got on the bus. I was the last one to get on the bus, and I sat in the front. For some reason, everybody else went to the back, because by then it was late in the evening. And lo and behold, the 4 men I'm talking about came out to that rear door because there really was no reason for them to be there. 2 should have been working. The other 2 I have no idea. But they came out, and they were all standing the entire time, and they were lighting up cigarettes. It doesn't, still at that moment, still doesn't really completely look like it was anything out of the ordinary. Maybe they've taken a break, maybe they knew each other, but I'm weary of that because it's an airport. So who has access to an airport? If you don't have business in an airport, someone is going to tell you to leave. Someone's going to ask you, why are you here? If you're not boarding a flight, you're not getting off a flight. If you're not waiting for someone in an area, for someone who's getting off a flight or working here, then why are you here? But none of these things happened. So these 4 guys lit up cigarettes, and they were talking, and someone had a drink from the concession stand. The same guy wearing his uniform with a little ball cap, and I guess he sold hot dogs or something like that. Something that would be totally ordinary. But as soon as the bus driver came in and closed the door, this guy started to high five. And I still didn't watch this pull out. My phone was on the fritz, so I wanted to get a good video of them, but I could describe them to anyone. That's not the end of the story, of course. Getting to base and then going through the check-in process and all that, pretty routine stuff, and then that kind of stuck in the back of my mind. So I tried to report this to as many people as I could. And I got bounced from one person to the next one, all military, who seemed to be really fascinating, and that this thing with their hands just, yeah, that sounds serious. Someone should do something about that. Yeah, how about you? I got passed around, recommended to go to other people who were higher rank, who proceeded to blow me off. Maybe you should call CID. What's the number to CID? And that went on for about 3 days before I finally give in. I have two theories about that. No one took it seriously, or maybe this is something that they're aware of, and maybe they're monitoring. It could be. It happens. Intelligence, both sides have to gather information about each other. So they, as long as they're not attacking each other, it's not imminent danger. I guess that's what they do. They observe and then they report. But to me, I'm caught in the middle. Like, I'm noticing activity, but why is it not actionable? And I know that no one did anything, because when someone takes you seriously or there's a complaint, someone more than likely will come to you requesting you to set some time aside so they can file a report. They want to interview and do a report. Because I've done the same thing in security, and people complain about something or somebody, and I know they're on the level, they either threatened and there's too much of a risk, or they're just full of it. And that's how I usually figure out that they may not be on the level, because they don't want a name on an official report. They don't actually want to file a formal complaint. And I was treated in the same way. So after 3 days, I said, you know what, I'm just going to go to my training, get my shots, and do everything else, poke and prodding that I'm supposed to go through like everybody else. And after 2 weeks, I was allowed to deploy from that base. So in seeing the story here, this is active people taking money and actually trying to talk people into participating in espionage. And these cases don't just they don't get discovered overnight. This is probably something that has been in the works for some time, and now it's finally coming to fruition. I finally caught them in the act, or they finally have enough evidence to actually file a complaint. And this is going back to 2022. This is still fairly recent, even though it's 2025. When there's money already exchanged for services, for information. And just like my friend back in Iraq that found a GPS unit, yeah, that could be a sensitive item, but someone drops it. This person in Mexico City, they have a phone. Now the bad guys tracked everything they do. It doesn't amaze me. It inspires me to try to figure out how they discovered the vulnerability. If you're not vulnerable in the first place, then they're not going to be able to catch that gap in security. But nothing's perfect in security. In fact, just when we move one thing and we think that we've plugged in all the gaps, here comes another one. Something else gets uncovered, or we don't pay as much attention to it in other areas. And this is something Navy hasn't been investigating. So the case in Mexico City, I'm sure that's ongoing, because someone's going to find out, and I'm not privy to the case, of course, how the data was discovered, how it was acquired. And then that's something that has to be mitigated, it has to be covered. A lot of people, they're going to have security and safety and stand down. This is when the military, they say, when we have some rule about sitting down about a safety briefing, this is exactly where this come from. Someone made a mistake, sometimes not on purpose, not taking an unnecessary risk. They just they just made a mistake and didn't catch it. So if this is a good lesson, if when you think you might be compromised, don't text and try not to use any electronic devices with the Wi-Fi. That's pretty standard advice, not to log into someone's Wi-Fi. If you're at a restaurant or cafe or any store where they say we have free Wi-Fi, okay, don't do anything that normally you consider to be of a sensitive nature, because that's another vehicle that the hackers can use. So it could be just as easy as that. The person didn't lose custody of their electronic device. They just simply used it in a public place where it was vulnerable, and that went unnoticed. So a lot. This is the complaint. I'm gonna have to download it from the website, but I'm not seeing a lot of dissemination of these stories. You just be mindful of your data. Be mindful of your electronic devices. This could be for anyone. I'm getting a lot of for the websites that I use. I'm getting some texts that I know they come from a foreign entity. And why is that? Because there are a lot of scams. But it may be scams trying to get you money, but it's also scams to actually gain access to just the average civilians' communications. Why not? You keep people. If you're from foreign agents trying to destabilize the country, There can be many theories on that. I had not really examined them closely. I wanted to share these thoughts with you, that I'm sure if those weird calls and texts you get that they're not from contacts, and they look at the email address where that text comes into your phone, and half the time I know there's some sort of a scam, but that could be a phishing scam. It could be something else to install that software to your phone, etc. And that's more than likely is what happened. Like I said, these are just loose theories and some potential scenarios how that happened. But the cartels know where you are. Take that with a grain of salt. If you're working a contract and if you're thinking of working for the government, it happens to even the toughest, most secure agencies. It still happens because you have the human element involved, and that's where the greatest vulnerability exists. The technology is something that can be fixed, but people will always make mistakes, it is both advantage and a risk that we undertake daily. I hope there's some way to mitigate that at some point, but we're all exposed. But this one, not liking it too much. Would you like that to be followed? And when you go to a foreign country, you should expect to be followed. And I've had friends who tell me, how does somebody know they live in a city? People always watching you in a city. If you go traveling, even for business or pleasure, we just don't know how their security is run. National security, how they protect themselves. And they send someone to track you. I can name some countries where they do that openly. Just go on about your business. Don't challenge. That could be just tips for travelers for another day. But it goes on. We monitor people who come here from other countries. So this is not like new. But when it happens, a foreign national in our country, then now we're really going down that rabbit hole of security, where someone made a mistake, a little bit higher level mistake. That's what we trying to avoid. I want to thank you for your time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That will help me out a lot. I appreciate your support. I'll see you again soon.